As investors and developers, we see the world differently. This podcast uncovers the untold truths of what it really takes to become a multi-million dollar residential developer. I'm Nathan Battershall. Let's get to work. Well, welcome to our latest episode of the Residential Developer Podcast. My name's Nathan Battershall and I'm your host, and we're really privileged to have Mulisa from Mosros Property. You would have seen that he was on a recent episode. We had so much traction on that episode. It's such an important topic. We've got him on to talk about some other matters. We want to talk about uncovering prime development sites. So welcome back to the podcast, Mulisa.
G'day, Nathan. How have you been?
Good, mate. Good. It's good to have you back on.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, mate.
Excellent. You've obviously been flat out finding sites, looking for sites, dealing with vendors. Tell us a little bit about what you've been up to.
Yeah, busy as always, mate. Getting a lot of traction. Things are getting a lot of busy, a lot of negotiations lately, closing deals, just a lot of movement, a lot of back and forth movement.
Yeah. And in terms of site finding, what sort of development sites are you finding?
So at the moment, we're highly focused on duplex sites, CTC, DA duplex sites that are about 200 meters closer to the water, northern Wollongong, and in Sydney as well.
Yep.
And soon we'll be looking at the Shire as well. So we're expanding, looking out.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And obviously there's been some exciting news in New South Wales, especially the announcement of the low-rise up changes that the state government's brought into effect, which will enable duplexes to now be on 12-metre wide blocks, 450 square metres, opening up a whole bunch of new suburbs, especially in Sydney, where you haven't previously been able to do duplexes. The downside, I guess, is that they have to be DA, at least for the next 12 months. But the good thing is that there's new areas are opening, and I know just from our conversations earlier that you mentioned that already you're seeing inquiries coming in suburbs, especially like areas of the northern beaches and Epping and areas where you haven't been able to do duplexes in the past, but even areas where the lot size was too large and now all of a sudden you can do duplexes on smaller lots.
Yeah, so I think this is something that should have been done a long time ago. So it's already overdue, but it's going to help the market a lot, right? So we've been struggling with having a small pool of properties that can be developed. So this is going to unlock much more potential into the area, and hopefully in the future we'll be able to do them CDC.
Yeah. And I guess from our previous episode where you came on, I guess DA generally equals a lot more delay and a lot more time. But obviously, speaking to you on that previous episode, you discussed the power of actually often you can get large, like longer delayed settlements. So just because it's DA and just because over the next 12 months some of these areas have to be DA doesn't necessarily mean that you can't go in with the strategy. Is that right? To get longer settlements?
Yeah, so the strategy suits either way. And one other thing, the CTC and DA thing, a lot of people will hold on to having developments out of CTC. So there's sometimes where properties suit a DA. So you'll be losing money if you're going to be doing them a CDC, where you can get a smaller garage, you're going to have to put a carport. So in some areas you need to use the DA to unlock the full potential of the property. Even though the approval might take extra 4 months, you're making an extra $500,000. So I think that extra $100,000 a month works out at the end. Yeah.
Definitely, and that's where it's important to know the numbers, isn't it? The strategy, the numbers, what can add additional uplift to a property.
Yes, and every area is different. I think we spoke about this last time. So some areas you can get away with putting 3-bedroom properties.
Yeah.
Some areas that need to be 4 bedrooms. So you really need to know which particular area you're dealing with and kind of let the area dictate what you're going to put there.
Yeah. And look, today I really want to hone in and talk a lot about location, because location is such a vital part of any investor or developer's journey. Obviously, our audience are investors, developers, or people passionate about doing investment and development. Why is it important to really hone in on a location for, let's just talk about, for today's sake, duplexes and townhouses? What is it about those type of projects? Why is location so crucial when it comes to developing these smaller projects?
Okay, so location is pretty much the first thing before you can even move forward in securing a property is determining which location is actually feasible. So most people see some locations that have a lot of duplexes, a lot of townhouses. They see them going on, and they chase these areas, but the numbers most often don't work in many places. So there's particular places that work where the end product is still demanding a good premium, but the actual property you're gonna have to buy, the land, is still cheap enough to be feasible. So what I see happening a lot. So initially, let's say you can buy a block of land, 600,000 square meters, $1 million. You build the duplex. The duplexes are selling for $2 million. So after time, after a couple years, those $2 million duplexes, the price starts trickling down onto the land. Now the land, it costs $1.5 million, but the duplexes are up maybe $2.1 million. So now they're not feasible. So areas are feasible until they're not feasible. So you really need to get a location when it's in its infant stages where it's feasible, because it's only going to be feasible for some years.
Yeah,
So location is a big deal. It's something you really need to look at, because you can't move forward until you determine which location you're looking at.
Yeah, and I guess you're right, aren't you? Like sometimes, sadly, some people are too late to the party. They're too late to the party when it comes to sourcing a location. There might be a year or 2 years, 3 years too late.
Yes. As an example, we had a client with a meeting just yesterday, right? So they have a particular area they've been looking at. They really wanted this area. I told them a while ago the area doesn't really work. So I had to sort of show them why it doesn't work. Because they came to me and said, but there's a lot of townhouses, a lot of duplexes there. So when you see this, most people have to realize, when you see these new duplexes, new townhouses, these properties were bought mostly 3 years ago.
Yeah,
Different market, different prices.
yeah.
So if you see something getting built now, it was bought a long time ago. So you need to get into places where you're in the early stages. You can't be coming into something that's already established, because it's already priced high. The new product price ends up trickling down to the old stuff. Now everything ends up worth a lot of money, and there's just no room to make money.
Yeah.
There's just no room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And look, it'd be interesting to know, have you got a couple of top factors, whether it's a top three or some top factors that come into play when it comes to what makes a location terrific or profitable when it comes to doing duplexes, townhouses, smaller residential developers? What are some top three factors that you've discovered, or some top factors that you've identified?
Okay, so the main factor you want to look at is the end product. So that's number one. You can't move further until that's done. So you want to make sure the end product sells for a premium. So we all know how much it's going to cost roughly to build it, but does the end product sell for a high premium where it leaves enough room to make profit? That's number one, right? Number two, you need to find out how much the average property there sells for. If the average property there sells for close enough to the end product, you're most likely not going to make much money. So that's number two. And the third thing, you need to find out how much of these properties even exist. If there's only about 8 or 5 in this area, it's going to be a problem. So you really need to find out those three things, then you know where to move. If it passes those three things, that area is fair game.
Yeah. Excellent. And look, it'd be good just to get a real life scenario. Like, have you got obviously you don't have to give us an address, but maybe a suburb or an area where you just had a location just played a massive role. It was a game changer in terms of the success of that development, the end product, the profitability. Like, have you got a product, like a site you can talk about?
Yes. So I'll talk about a site in a particular area. So the Rural is a great area, right? I'll talk about this area a lot for now. So their end products is sell at a premium. So you're getting duplexes through Redmond Street. There's Redmond Avenue, Lawrence Hargrave. Those particular streets that are closer to the water, and with the property we're looking at on Harbord Street as well. So very premium areas, right? So duplexes they are selling for $3 million or so, and average properties are selling at $2 million. So you're able to get a property anywhere in that area for around $2 million, which is the average market price. So you don't have to underpay. You can pay the average market price and you can make great profit. So those are areas where at the moment they're working. Areas like the Rule and Taraji is another great area. Austin Mart is a great area. Winona, those are great areas.
Yeah.
Yes.
And what is it about? And obviously, there's different locations across all of New South Wales, especially on the east coast. Like, what is it? What are some key factors that make locations terrific? Like, are we talking close to water, close to schools, close to shops, close to cafes? Like, what are some things that you've found, like common trends across? Obviously, you do acquisition across all of New South Wales and even interstate. But what are some key things that you find make a site,
Okay. So
like from a practical level?
number one is the proximity to the beach.
Yep.
That's number one. And number two in Australia are views.
Yep.
Views do a lot on the pricing. Another thing, third, has to be close to a cafe. Public transport, 50-50, but it has to be close to a cafe. Schools, 50-50, but if it's close to a great respected school, that raises the price, right? So those are really the main things. Proximity to the beach, proximity to the city as well. You want the property to be close enough to the city. So those things you can't go wrong with. You can't go wrong in Australia. But one other thing you also want to take into consideration, you want to look at places where there's infrastructure. So when you're purchasing, you want to make sure it's a place that's going to hold value. And there's particular things that help a place hold value. Things such as hospitals, universities, big schools, and industries such as mines and so on. So those are things that are very hard to get rid of. It's hard to close down a main hospital. It's hard to close down a university. So you understand these things are most likely going to be here in 30 years, right? It's hard to close down big industries, big mining towns, mining cities. So everything kind of gets built around that. So those are the places that kind of determine what value is going to be there in 30 years from now, 20 years from now.
Yeah. I remember hearing a really good saying once, and I think it's so true, isn't it? Like, have a look at where the government, have a look at where the local government, the state government, the federal government is spending money. So if they're spending money there, there's a good chance you should be spending money there too.
Exactly.
Because they've obviously seen potential in those areas.
Exactly.
So it's an important sphere.
Yeah.
And I guess another important thing to look at as well is the strategy of your development too, because you might be looking to sell both of your products right away. So the strategy involved then is obviously you need to target a location, I'm guessing, where you need to get the best price tomorrow.
Yep.
Whereas you might have a long-term strategy. You might have targeted an area where capital growth is amazing, where the history might show that particular suburb or that particular location virtually doubles every 10 years, for example, on average. So if you're looking to hold for 10 years, well, sometimes it's looking at if your strategy is to hold for long term, you can look at the capital growth strategy too, I guess. Like, is that something you've got a lot of clients that play they're thinking that way in minded too? Like, is it a long term hold or is it a short term sell?
Most of the clients work with the short term, not the long term holds. We're in the business of helping clients make money, build cash flow and money and so on. So most of the people we deal with, they want to make money in the next year after, and keep it growing, right?
Yeah.
So those most people would deal with. Yeah.
And obviously, a lot of times we talk about what makes a location good, but I think it's just as important for investors and developers to know what makes a location bad as well. Because for me, like that's just as important, if not more important, to avoid securing a site in a bad location. Like like what are some things that you're looking for? What are some things that obviously from a profitability perspective, but also a practical level, what are things that you find make an area or a site or a street or a parcel of land bad? Like what makes the location bad that can impact profit
Okay.
on the site?
So there's multiple things that can make it bad, and it's also subjective to what you're trying to do. So there's some areas where you really need to do great research on a particular area and know what you're trying to do. If your end product, some places they're good for duplexes. So let's look at a place like Coromel, right? It's Coromel. They're great for townhouses, not as great for duplexes.
Yeah.
So you really need to know what you're putting there. So because I could determine it could be bad for a duplex, but it could be good for a townhouse. Also, you want to make sure it's not places that have too many trees. A site with a lot of trees, that's problematic. In Wollongong, we know sites that are slanted backwards. That's a big no-no. You also want to avoid sites that have bus stops right at the very front. You want to avoid sites that are right next to a shopping mall. You want to avoid sites that are right in front of highways, major traffic, and so on. And also one other thing that it does matter, it's just a fact of it. A lot of government housing does lower the price on areas, or on particular areas. So not in every area, but in particular areas it does. Yeah. So those are some things you need to look out for in particular areas. Yes.
Yep. And I guess if you haven't driven down that street, done a bit more research, sometimes you can miss that, can't you?
Yes. And also some areas there's just not much infrastructure, right? There's places with terrible infrastructure, there's terrible storm water, places that flood all the time. They've got bad streets, potholes everywhere, trees everywhere, and just the properties around that whole area are not quite looked after. You know? So you really what you're putting, what your end product needs to fit in where you're putting it, right? You can't put a $10 million mansion in the middle of a housing estate. Right. So it matters what you're trying to put in a particular area.
And I guess, do people go down as far as looking at things like crime rates, unemployment rates, all that sort of thing too? Like,
yeah, crime rate, yes. Unemployment rate, yeah. So those usually go hand in hand with the kind of like housing areas and so on. But there's some areas with high crime rate where it's best off to stay away from. But this is the thing: these areas change a lot.
Yeah.
So there's some areas that were let's talk hypothetically. Let's talk about places near Glebe here. This is for Sydney, just near the city in Redfern. Places like Redfern. Yeah. Redfern was a low-income area, right? A crime-ridden area.
Yep.
Look at it now.
Yeah. Gentrified.
Exactly.
Beautiful.
Look at it now. So it's a place that's almost impossible to buy into.
Yeah.
So sometimes you just don't know. It's a gamble, but you'd want to do your research and kind of know what's coming in the future. And before you buy an area, kind of at least be able to tell what's going to happen in the near future, in the next couple of years, 3-4 years at the least. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess that's another thing, isn't it? If you look at the government start spending money in certain areas, you start to see early adoption of infrastructure, gentrification, beautification of certain areas. You can you can really start to see things come to life.
Yes.
You've only got to look at King's Cross. I remember as a young bloke, going to King's Cross, the nightclubs and everything when I was young, and you go there now, it's just trendy. Everything's trendy. It's trendy cafes, apartments, like it's just completely changed. But you're right. You've really got to make sure you do your research and you know what you're dealing with in that area.
Yes. In this industry we're in, it's easy to make mistakes, and usually when you make them, they can cost you dearly. So you really need to make sure you cross your X's and O's and just make sure you know what you're doing.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, we might jump into a little bit of rapid fire.
Yep.
Just some things that come straight to mind.
Let's go.
There's no right or wrong answer, so to speak. It's just basically Mulisa just giving us just some of his thoughts. So the first one was Now, what's the first thing you look for? First thing you look for in a potential development site. Go.
The very first thing I look for is the market research in the area, the end product. I need to know the end product price,
Yep.
what it sells for.
Yeah.
Mhm.
What are some top suburbs in New South Wales at the moment for small developments?
I love Thuroo.
Yep.
I love Austin Ma. I love Taraji
Yep.
and the Shire, places in the Shire. I love, let's say, Matraville, Eastwood.
Yep.
Yeah, I love those areas.
Excellent.
Yep.
What's the most common mistake developments make regarding a location?
Not doing market research and overpaying.
Yep.
Yep.
And what's your current favourite tool, online tool or tool that you use for market research?
At the moment, I like, let's have a look.
Or you can tell us all the tools you currently use.
Yeah, I use domain price finder, Akistar, Stash, CDC Finder, realestate.com. Yeah, I use a lot of them.
So you got a few tools in
Yes.
the toolkit.
Yep.
All right. And what's one piece of advice for new developers starting out when it comes to location?
Is research. Really know the market, know what you can put there, you know the end product, and know the difference between the end product and your starting point.
Yep.
Yep.
That's brilliant. And look, what are some tips you can give listeners, whether it be experienced developers, investors, or first timers? What are some thoughts you can share? I guess now that they can get basically about choosing the right location for their next projects. What are some tips that you can give them, like some practical tips, like a little toolbox of tips that they could do, like off the back of this podcast, they can implement these things and begin the process of finding a site.
Okay, so when you're finding sites, you don't follow you try to do your own research, do a lot of calling. Don't look at the numbers that are online as such. So I know a lot of people see properties selling on All Homes and so on. A lot of them actually don't even sell on market. So I'd say call the agents to actually find out what's going on in this particular areas, and also just look at areas where I keep saying this, the end product. Look at the areas where the end product sells at a premium, because it costs the same to build in a place where you're going to sell for $2 million compared to a place where you're going to sell a property for $4 million. It costs the same for the build, right? So just find an area where the end product sells for a lot, and just make sure the average property sells for a lot less.
Yep. Yep.
It's really as simple as that. Yeah.
Yep. And like some people get set on a location, but the location doesn't always stack up and work. Like how would you help someone who maybe is a little bit emotionally invested in a particular area that, yes, it might be a nice area, but the numbers just don't work? Like how would you help someone navigate their way out of that place? I'm sure you've had clients who've maybe had their blinkers on, or they've had their rose-coloured glasses on looking at a suburb, maybe because they grew up there or they've got good memories there or they went on holidays to that particular place, but it just doesn't stack up. Like how would you help someone, I guess, navigate that emotionally?
So the best thing I do is I'll go through the numbers with them, and you have to honestly do the numbers. So if you try to lie to yourself when you do this, you're going to pay for it, right? So there's no winning when you're cutting shortcuts on numbers. So the best thing is really look at the numbers. The numbers won't lie. They'll tell you.
Yeah.
They'll tell you straight away.
Yeah.
Yeah. So really do the numbers, but don't try to push something to work. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And you can't be emotionally attached to an area, because as soon as you're emotionally attached to an idea, it's much harder to let it go, even if it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just try to avoid being in that situation. If you find yourself in that situation, really just take a look back and think, what would someone else who's smarter than me do about this situation?
Yeah.
Yeah. So just look at it from a different perspective. Look at a third person perspective. Say, okay, this is my situation. This is what I think of this area. But what would someone else who's more intelligent than me think of this situation I'm in? Yeah. And just do that.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yep.
Excellent. Well, look, what we might jump into our development Shark Tank.
Yep.
I thought what we might do, we might just change it up today. I want to talk about one deal that didn't go ahead. I want to talk about the Lawrence Hargrove
Yes.
site.
Yeah.
it looked good. The numbers stacked up. Amazing site, amazing location. But obviously, we identified some things on the site before the client purchased it, which is great. Means they didn't buy a headache.
Yep.
But then I want to talk about the Sturdy Street Taraji deal that's going ahead. It's a cracker. It's a good deal. You know, it hits over the 20%. We've got so many clients that are happy to hit 15. Anything over 20 is brilliant.
Yes.
But, you know, we've got a lot of clients happy to do 15, 16, 17, 18. When you get these ones over 20, they're terrific. So what we might do, let's talk about the Thurul site first. Let's just talk through that one. So you're able to negotiate on that site. Tell us a little bit about that one.
Yeah, so that was a beautiful site. So we had it at $2 million. It's got ocean views from the back. It's literally a stone throw away from the beach. And the property had a beautiful sizing, right? And we got it at 12-month settlement, great terms, amazing property. So it looks great. It's got drainage from the front. Everything looks good. But this is where it's very important to have a due diligence period or some sort of period before you actually put a deposit down and you exchange unconditionally. You need to have a little bit of time to spend a little bit of money and to do some research. So on that particular property, everything looks good. From top, it looks good, but there's a waterway running through under the back. So you can't sit with your own eyes, but there is a waterway running underground there.
So until you buy a couple of reports in that case, until we're able to buy, some of the reports, we could then do some studies and engage a flood engineer to identify that we had a water course that actually caused some potentially pretty severe flooding issues. That yes, it's probably a fight to get it approved, but you're probably looking at it's a touch and go one whether we'd be able to get a dual occupancy, let alone a subdivision on the site.
Yeah, it's a fight you don't want to take.
Yeah, that's it. And I guess with the reason I like to talk about deals that don't work, because I think it's important for investors and developers to understand that there's strategies out there to avoid buying a headache. Week in, week out, I see where people have bought a headache. And I love your strategy because you're dealing off market. You're going completely off market. Investors and developers aren't competing with 10, 15, 20 other buyers. So you're able to get that due diligence period, as you mentioned, where the client can then go and spend just a little bit of money, not too much, but enough to be able to do their due diligence. Like, would you rather spend $1,000 or a couple of grand to avoid a headache, or would you rather not spend that couple of grand and then buy a site for $2 million you can't develop?
Exactly, lose hundreds of thousands.
Exactly.
Which happens a lot.
Yeah.
Which happens quite a lot. So we just, it's funny we talk about sites that don't work. We just had a fella who just needed help get rid of a site. So he bought this property for $1.4 million a couple of years ago. He got a DA on it for a duplex and they knocked the property down. They started about to do the development. So they knocked it down. But then he came to me to see if I can help him. And I'm looking at the property. I'm thinking, the only way it works is really if you're paying $600,000, right? And back then, maybe you could have got away with paying $900,000 because construction fees were still a little bit lower, right? But now, probably $600,000. But the problem is knock the house down. Yeah. So you can't renovate the house and sell it as a house and recoup maybe $1.1 million. Yep. Now it's just a piece of land. So this happens a lot, by the way. So this is not a rare occasion, rare situation. This is 90% of the time people buy properties that are overpriced. It happens a lot. So most people don't do their numbers well. They'll just look at a property and go, I'm paying $1 million for the property. I can build a duplex, sell for $1.5 million each. I've made $500,000 profit. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah. No, I like that. And look, I think for me, like looking at those sites that don't work, like this one at Thurul, the numbers stacked up
beautifully.
The price was great. The end profit would have been great. There was great terms on the property, but there was this constraint, and it involved a lot of risk.
Yep.
And the beauty is by having that due diligence period of time, the client was able to just spend a little bit of money, get the advice, and then was able to strip the emotion out of it.
Yep.
Because it would be easy, and I went on that site, you went on that site.
Yeah.
It would be easy to be at that site and just fall absolutely in love with it. We're
Yes.
talking 120 metres, and you're down on the main beach at the Royal. Beautiful site. It faced sort of northeast, so it had a perfect aspect. There were so many things to love about it.
Yeah.
But I love the fact that the client was able to strip away the emotion,
Yeah.
look at it through the eyes and the lens of a business decision, and basically strip the emotion away and realise, hey, do I want to fight this battle? Do I want to go through the stress? Do I want to go through the headaches on a site that may never be able to be subdivided? And I guess it was a good feeling to see that client that, we were able to help them navigate not buying a headache.
Yeah.
It's disappointing, isn't it?
It
It's
is.
disappointing when you look at the numbers.
It is, but they end up getting something great. So
Exactly,
I'm happy
and
with
and
that.
that's and there's always another property.
Yeah.
And this is something I'll always be saying to investors and developers, like, if you're patient, if you play the long game, like too many people, they want everything quick now. Like we live in a microwave generation, so everything's now. But by playing the patient game, they've now got a site that's a lot, no headaches. This one's even CDC, so it's faster.
Much better.
It doesn't hit the same numbers, but it still hits incredible numbers.
Yes.
But they can go to sleep at night knowing that, not stressing whether they're going to get an approval, or stressing whether this thing will get off the ground. And
Yes.
I just think that's smart. That's the modern day smart investor, the modern day smart developer.
Yep.
Well, let's talk about a deal that worked.
Yes.
We obviously spoke about one last month. Let's talk about a deal. Let's talk about that deal on Sturdy Street. So tell us a little bit about this one on Sturdy Street in Taraji for those who don't know.
So Sturdy Street is one of the premium areas of Taraji. So essentially, this street takes you to a park straight to the beach.
Yep.
Beautiful. You're not crossing any main roads. It's just in a beautiful placement, right? So this property is CDC. This is a CDC duplex. There's no need for a DA, and property is priced well. We got it just below market value at 1.15. Got at great terms, 10-month settlement period. So it gives more than enough time to get the client wanted less time. So we had to negotiate. The vendor wanted to do 12 months or more.
Yes.
Right? So we really had to try. The client wanted 6 months. So we went in the middle at 10 months.
Yeah.
You know? So a 10-month settlement period, and we get our CDC in the meantime.
Yeah.
So that's beautiful. 5% deposit.
Yeah.
Beautiful deal. Numbers at 23% profit investment. This is conservative as well.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And and by the time it's done, the duplexes will be selling for a lot more in that area.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's it. It was a cracking site, and for me, I look at that and it was, probably over 100K less than market value.
Yeah, definitely.
When I say market value, like often that market value sometimes at an auction or at when there's a lot of interest, or especially if builders are going for it as well, they can often pay a little bit more. They can even go sometimes up to 1.3, or because they can run at smaller margins for their development. So that's where it was terrific, wasn't it? Like to get those sort of terms, and that 10 months is great because you can not only execute the design, execute the approval on the site, but you give yourself sort of a buffer period of time to finalise the builder, make sure the builder, because this is the thing, sometimes people get an approval, but it doesn't necessarily mean the builder's ready to start. The builder may not be quite ready. They might be 2 months away from starting. So by getting the 10 months, then you can prepare your builder saying, hey, we want to start this virtually as soon as we've basically settled on the property. So if we settle in 10 months, you can just reverse engineer the numbers and work backwards. So you're not paying all that interest on a property for 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months before the builder can start. So it's brilliant, isn't it? Like in terms of from a planning point of view.
It's perfect. So it's as good of a situation as you can get, you know. And these are rare situations because most of the times you're trying to make things work. You're trying to use your intelligence, right, to see something that the average person won't be able to see, right? So most people will walk past other properties because it's something that they can't see. Let's talk about actually the one we talked about last time, Evans Street.
Yes.
There's not a lot of market comparison because the area, there's not many sales in that area.
Yeah.
And there's not many duplexes in the area, and a lot of them sold off market. So
Yeah.
the only way to find out is to make calls to the people who sold the properties off market
Yeah.
and calls to the agents. Then you know how much a duplex in that area costs. So a lot of people walk past these properties because they just don't see the comparables.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they don't understand that this area costs a lot of money. So with this one, everything was just there.
Yeah.
You know, so it's one of those very simple, straightforward
Yeah.
properties. Yeah.
And obviously today we're honing in very much on location. Like what was it about this sturdy street? What are some things in terms of location? What are we talking? Like how far from the beach?
So the
How
first
far from the park?
So the first thing, the property was about, say, 500 meters away from the beach, if that, right?
Yeah.
So that was the very, very first thing I managed to look at the property. And it also wasn't close to any main roads. It didn't have any trees on it. It was sloped to the front. The location was great. It was also not facing a bit. There was just it was perfect. You know,
Yeah.
that's as good as a location can get. And one other thing, it had duplexes around that
Yeah.
have just been done.
Yeah.
2 doors down, across the road. So the end product was already getting sold in that area.
So
So
really good comparables.
yes,
Able to
great
get really good,
comparables.
able to get really good data.
Yes.
Yeah, and that site was terrific too because it was so flat. Like that's one good thing about a lot of parts like that area, Taraji. There's a lot of areas where we can do developments, duplexes, townhouses, where you're dealing with a lot of sloping blocks. Even though it may drain to the front for stormwater perspective, you're dealing with a lot of excavation. You're dealing with a lot of site costs that can actually really jack up the price of a development. So this site was terrific because it's dead flat. Like it's got a very gentle slope to the front, but we're talking like so flat that you can just do a really simple, conventional waffle pod slab system. It's just nice and clean. Like you said, there was no native trees. There was no trees that were going to cause issues. There was one small tree that was on the exempt species list, which meant that it can be taken out without any form of approval. It was under the threshold and the height. So like it was just a really nice, clean site for the client. Like you said, delayed settlement, great price, hits good numbers with conservative figures. Just a cracking deal.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I love more of them.
Yeah, that's it. More and more.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Well, look, in terms of just to wrap us up, really, like, have you got any final insights or anything? I guess you want to speak into from the perspective of location, because obviously, location is so vital, so important when it comes to small investment development based projects across New South Wales. Like, have you got some tips or some final insights or just some wisdom that you can share that can give value, to people listening to this podcast, listening to this episode, who are literally, next week or next month or in the next little period of time are ready to go and hunt down their next site, or ready to engage someone like yourself, or deal with an agent, or deal with a buyer's agent, or someone who's ready to go and hunt down their next site? Like, what? Just go freestyle and just speak into, give them some practical now tips of what they can take home or what they can apply right off the back of this.
So something to apply right off the back of this is you're having a look at the price of the end product. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. The end product is going to determine what can be done in the area. So let's say hypothetically you're looking for townhouses. Go look for areas where townhouses sell at a minimum of maybe $1 million, 1.3, $800,000. If that's the price now, you got to build maybe 5-6 townhouses to be feasible. So look at areas where you can sell an end product of 1.2 for townhouses. Duplexes. Look for areas where you can sell duplexes for minimum $2 million each. So look for these particular areas, and then once you found them, look for the average price of the property. So let's say you find a place where duplexes sell for $2 million, the average property price sells for $1 million, 1.2, even 1.3. Those areas work. So that's what you're going to look at. So you just look at the end product, then look at the cost of the average property. Then that will determine what can be done in the area and which areas work.
Excellent. And look, just lastly, I just listening to your talk, it jumped out at me, and I think it's an important question because I hear a lot of it. It's important for people to obviously know what their borrowing capacity is and what their capacity is to buy land plus all the costs. Like, do you find sometimes people are looking in areas it's not feasible? So they're factoring in the land, that's all well and good, but then they're factoring in building a duplex or building a townhouse development for an unrealistic price, when essentially what they need to be doing is reverse engineering their numbers and going back and saying, okay, realistically, the suburbs I'm looking in, the locations I'm looking in are not feasible for my budget. They're not feasible for my, for my capacity of what I can currently spend, and then going and like, how does someone research? Let's say someone hasn't got the ability to go do a site, for example, where they can, effectively sell a duplex each side for $2 million. What are some tips you can give someone in terms of, like, let's just say they've got, let's just say they've got 2.5 to spend total, like land plus build. Like, how do you find, what's the best place to start for someone to then go and identify what profitable areas they can then locate within that capacity of what they can currently spend?
Okay. So if hypothetically they've got 2.5 or so to spend, then they need to find out if they want to find out how much they can spend and which area they can pretty much, let's say, buy into. They need to find out and how much it's going to cost to do a build roughly, because it's pretty much going to be the same in which area you look at, in every area you look at.
Depending
right?
on the spec of the build and
Exactly.
what's under the ground.
Exactly. So if they've got roughly, let's say about 2.5, let's say the build is roughly going to cost 1.5. For, let's say, for both, the build is going to cost 1.5. They've got about $1 million roughly left. So let's say really they can purchase in an area, they can purchase for around $900,000, right? So now they have to find a place where end product can sell for around 1.8, 1.9. So you have to work it backwards. Right, you have to work it backwards, and also leave a little bit of room, leave a little bit of buffer to go wrong. If you push yourself to the edge, you most of your calculations you're going to go over by a little bit, right? So always leave a little bit of buffer for things to go wrong, because where things can go wrong, they usually do.
And the beauty of, like, a duplex, for example, is a little bit different. And obviously with townhouses, you're taking on a lot more risk. The beauty of a duplex, it's a very low risk. It's quite a low risk development, so you can quite often lower your margins a bit. I think sometimes people have these unrealistic margins where they're expecting, like, every now and then you'll hit a jackpot or you'll hit a gold mine, but generally, I find a lot of people that they're making good money doing low risk, doing your 18% sort of thing. Yes, you're going to find some bigger ones, but there's some really good deals if you do your research right, isn't there? Like, where you've got to also make sure your margin and your expectation is realistic.
Yes.
Because essentially that's where you get people trying to get land for an impossible price, or you get people expecting a builder to build a product, a $1.5 million build for 1.1 or 1.2, and it doesn't happen. Like, it doesn't work. The reality was that their margin was unrealistic, or they paid too much for the site. Yeah,
so that comes with thinking emotionally, you falling in love with the idea. So just let the numbers do the work, and make sure you don't play with the numbers, because it's only going to hurt you at the end. So you have to be truthful with the numbers. It's going to benefit you. And I understand there's a lot of love with the 20% profit on investment thing. There's a lot of love for that. But that was more for standard when years ago when the construction fees were much lower, right? So you could buy 20% profit investment sites anywhere on the market. That's almost you find them now, but you have to be intentionally looking for these things, and it's going to take time, right? So a lot of people are working at even 15-16% profit investment. If you just keep looking for these 20% profit investments, you might take a year before you get your next deal. So you really have to be realistic on what's actually there. You really have to be realistic with your numbers.
Excellent. Well, mate, it's been good to get you back on. You've always got a huge amount of wisdom and insight and knowledge, and we'll be definitely putting your information on how to contact you on the show notes. So thanks again for coming in.
Lovely, mate. Love it.
Wonderful. Well, thanks everyone for listening in. I'm sure you got a lot of value out of this. Location is so vital and so important for when finding your next development site. So look, all of Mulisa's information at Mosros Property is going to be in the show notes. Make sure you reach out to him if you need hand for land acquisition, looking at a site, looking at research, or want some insight and knowledge. Mulisa's always willing and happy to give insightful information into that. So look, if you enjoyed this episode, feel free to share it with friends, family, colleagues, or fellow investors and developers. And once again, don't forget to like and subscribe on all of our channels. And thanks for listening, and look forward to chatting to you again next week.